Hello and welcome to today's meeting of the Rotary Club of Tulsa. Some of you know I'm a graduate of Southern Methodist University, and don't let anybody convince you that I haven't been a hardcore fan ever since, so go Ponies. Let's start today's meeting with a Pledge of Allegiance and guest introductions from DJ Morrow Ingram.
Thank you, Mr. President, and thank you, John Hamill, for the lovely Christmas music before the meeting. Today, Brian Bovard has two guests from the outdoor classroom of Tulsa. Oh, let's do the Pledge of Allegiance first, and then you can just sit down. I thought, why are they all standing? Join me in the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and for the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Now you may sit down. Let me try this again. We've mixed up the agenda a little bit today, and it's got my head all confuddled. So, Brian Bovard, and please stand as I introduce you and your guests. Brian Bovard has two guests from the outdoor classroom of Tulsa, Amanda Fisher and Zoe Hale. Thank you. Christopher Bryan has, I have to read this whole thing because it's so cool. Christopher Bryan has his fiancee partner, best business life, partner in business life in all things, Lisa Mast. Awesome. And Chuck Wilson has his wife, Charlotte McGuire. Welcome. And we have two prospective members. Stephen Elias has with him Pete Boylan, I even knew what that was. And Jim Ray has Amanda Adwan. Thank you all for coming, and if I missed anybody, I apologize, and thank you, and come back again. Give them applause.
I too would like to thank John for the festive music this morning, and I think we're in the full swing of the holiday season, so a special thanks to all Rotarians who have shared the magic of Rotary this season, including last week, ringing bells for the Salvation Army and participating with Shop with the Cop. We have some photos up there. They've been posted on social media. These are some of the things that our club does every year to help celebrate the holiday season and bringing joy to several people, including students from our partner in education school, Celia Clinton Elementary. For it is in giving that we receive. Special thanks this week also to Shanna Vollmer and the social committee for all their work organizing the holiday party, and to Sarah Stokely for hosting, and to Scott Philstrip for providing the entertainment from the Tulsa Opera. I was unable to attend this year as I was in Dallas for work, but I've been to these parties and I know how special it really is to have the opera singing in such a close proximity. So thank you, Shanna, and thank you, Sarah, and thank you, Scott, for helping us share the holiday season within our club. Rotary Fellowships are international groups that share a common passion. Being part of a fellowship is a fun way to make friends around the world, explore a hobby or profession, and enhance your Rotary experience. Please turn your attention to the screens for a short video.
If you think of what interests people have, there's a fellowship for it.
You share the same interest, you share the same hobby.
Photography is a fellowship. Swimming is a fellowship. There's so many fellowships.
Within the last year or so, I've gained so much more Rotary friends through fellowship. The fellowship that I belong to is a cycling fellowship, and we're able to raise money for polio just by riding our bikes.
It's the fact of taking your passions, your hobbies, and making that into a service opportunity, into a social opportunity. We do learn to surf events for high school kids, beach cleanups, things like that. It's also attracted people who are into those types of events to seek out, what is Rotary about?
And along those lines, as was mentioned last week, the 2025 Rotary International Convention will be in Calgary. Join President-elect Carl Vinson, Executive Director Tina Miller, District Governor-elect John Raines, and others in this transformative, one-of-a-kind event and experience. It will be June 21st to 25th, 2025, and we have another quick video on that as well.
There's something to our collective energy. When we gather each year, everyone belongs to something bigger than themselves. It is magnetic. It is moving. It is magic. We share friendship, experiences and new perspectives, awakening inspiration, unleashing possibility in ourselves, our communities, and around the world. It's a phenomenon like no other. Join us in Calgary for the 2025 Rotary International Convention and discover magic all around.
And assuming the theme holds true, when I was in Singapore and they were announcing Calgary as the destination, there were lots of cowboy hats and a huge sign that said howdy. So for those of you who may think that it's a little intimidating, I think you'll feel quite a bit at home at the Calgary Convention. Also, those last two topics do tie together. There are booths for all of these international fellowships, and it's a really good way to get involved, to meet the people who are leading our fellowships. It's a good way to meet Rotarians around the world. And before we move on, I'd like to give a special congratulations this week to Eric Cullen, who leads our club's Human Trafficking Committee. If you read District Governor Warren Lovinger's emails, Eric was highlighted this week, nominated by Barbara Kogerman, and it highlights the work that Eric does in our community, but also in the broader sense, having attended different conventions, and Eric, I believe, is also planning to attend the International Convention in Calgary to join the international efforts against human trafficking, which is a topic that Rotary International is very active in. Now it's Sarge time with Sarge Barker.
I'll use this microphone, sure. Hey everyone, it's good to be here. I am Sarge Barker. Welcome to the Price's Rotary. Do we have slides? Oh, okay. Well, I guess we don't have the slides today. Well, that could be an issue. But hey, I want to just give a brief announcement, and when we'll do slides for next week, and I promise you we'll go all out. There's one big thing that I want to announce. One is a very generous donation from Scott Philstrip. Scott, are you here today? Are you? Scott, thank you so much. If you stand up, we don't have a slide for Scott. But I just want to announce what a big giver he is, because recently he made a gift of $2,592. And I wanted to make sure I wasn't going to screw this up, so I had to write it down myself. But I just want to read this very briefly. It says, "I'd like to honor Scott Philstrip for his remarkably generous donation of $2,592 to Camp Enterprise, which partners closely with Junior Achievement. This reflects Scott's deep commitment to fostering the entrepreneurial spirit in future generations. In fact, I also want to point out that Scott was recently featured in a Tulsa World op-ed article by Junior Achievement President Shannon Beeler. In the article, Beeler discusses how Scott's influence extends far beyond financial support. Years ago, his mentorship of a young Bob Faith, then a Junior Achievement participant, sparked a passion for business that led Bob to eventually become the founder, chair, and CEO of Graystar, a global leader in rental housing. Scott's investment of time and guidance not only transformed Bob's life, but created a ripple effect of opportunities for countless others. Scott, your dedication to empowering young minds exemplifies the best of Rotary, and we are deeply grateful for the lasting legacy you are building." Now, there's a few other people on the slides that I apologize that I couldn't announce, but I want to make sure that you are recognized next week. But there's one other thing that I want to share too, and that is, as Sarge Barker, typically, if you've watched The Price's Rotary, what do they have typically at the end? The Showcase Showdown, right? And we're approaching the end of the year. So I wanted to be very aggressive, and originally my idea was that I wanted to do a Showcase Showdown. But they said, well, let's tap the brakes on that a little bit. But instead, what I want to do is the Holiday Season of Giving Showcase. And that's basically a way to thank all of you who have made a donation to the Rotary Club of Tulsa Foundation. Now, when I was talking with Charles over there, he mentioned, oh yeah, I need to make my donation by the end of the year because I have my money, I just haven't gotten it to you yet. So I want to encourage all of you to make a donation by the end of this month to the Rotary Club of Tulsa Foundation. If you've already made a donation and you feel being extra generous, make another donation. It won't matter. It's all for a great cause. But to recognize your donations, your achievement, and what we have been doing here at the Rotary Club, I have something very special to announce. So in the first week of January, we're going to put together all of the donors through the past year, and we're going to do a drawing. And what's the prize? We're going to have 2 club tickets to give away to the Andrea Bocelli concert in June, followed by a dinner donated by Medi Kazan that will be, you can use at Tiamo or Cafe Olé. So isn't that really cool? So we're going to be recognizing one very lucky winner who will have dinner and entertainment very soon. And that donation, Austin, if you could just stand up really quick. Austin's one of our new Rotary members. He was the one who actually helped make this happen, so I want to give all the credit to him. Now, Austin, I don't have my slides in front of me. That is through the Oakview Group, the Cox Business Center, and then also, what was the third sponsor? Okay, and Cox Business Center and the I'm sorry, the BOK Center. So let's give them a hand one more time. Thank you so much. So next week we will do the slides. We'll have them ready, I promise. And we'll also play the Price is Right game, which is the clock game. So everyone who has made a donation will be eligible to potentially play and win big and also give more money back to the Rotary Club of Tulsa Foundation. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Derek, and thank you to all the generous Rotarians in this room who are making great things happen for our foundation. I think we're all here familiar with Scott Philstrip's generosity, which will be shared again next week at our very special holiday program. Now for our Rotarian of the day. David Bryant is a lifelong Tulsan. He graduated from Memorial High School in 1981 and the University of Oklahoma in 1984. He's president of the Dave Bryant Agency, a farmers insurance group, taking over in 1984, the agency established by his father, Dave Bryant Sr. David has received numerous industry awards and is nationally recognized for his leadership in the insurance field. He has been an active civic leader and volunteer where he has served on numerous boards, including the Salvation Army, Monte Cassino, and Operation Aware, just to name a few. David and his wife Katie were grade school sweethearts at Monte Cassino, where they met in first grade. No stranger to Rotary, he was introduced to it at an early age by his grandfather, Clyde McMaster, who was a member of the Rotary Men of Note, and his father, former member here, as well as past president of the Southeast Club. Please welcome Rotarian of the Day, David Bryant.
I think you just said I'm old. If you've been fortunate enough to grow up in Tulsa, names like Lewis Meyer and Steve Stevenson will come right to mind as those who were great advocates for the city of Tulsa and passionate about books, passionate about developing everything in Tulsa. Today, someone else gets to carry that torch. Our guest today owns Magic City Books, and he is passionate about Tulsa, about making it a great place in which to live. This was recognized in 2020 as he was named Tulsan of the Year. It's my pleasure today to introduce to you our friend and owner of Magic City Books, Jeff Martin.
Thank you so much for having me. Big thank you to David, thank you to Karen, thank you to Philip Viles for making this happen. It's been a long time coming, so I'm glad to be here to speak with you. If you look at my bio or all these things we've done, there is a mirage of personal achievement there. And the real story underneath that is that my true skill has been aligning myself with amazing people along the way. And if I have any true superpower, it's maybe seeing how teaming up with the right folks could lead to something bigger. It's also about the audacity to ask. And that, in some ways, when I think about my life these past couple of decades, a lot of it boils down to that. When I got out of school, like a lot of people, kind of was a little bit aimless, didn't exactly know what I wanted to do. So I ended up working in a bookstore. And there was a woman working at the bookstore who did all of the large programs. And I was about 22, I guess, at the time, 23. And she had been doing these large programs, and I would help from time to time when there was something big. But at that time, I was a bookseller, and I was just kind of a little bit wandering around Tulsa, not knowing what to do. Well, I would help out from time to time. Well, she at one point had to go abroad to help a sick family member who lived, I want to say in Israel or somewhere, and had to go for an extended period of time. It was going to be like, say, 6 weeks. Well, when I heard that she had to go, for some reason that still remains inexplicable to me, I went to my boss and said, hey, instead of like trying to find a replacement for this next 6 weeks, I'm happy just to help out and take over and just, fill in. I had no real experience doing that work, but I thought, what is the harm in throwing your hat in the ring at that time? And so I think looking back, they said yes very quickly, probably because it made their job somewhat easier instead of having to find someone else. So they said, that's fine, do that. So for the next 5, 6 weeks, I was doing this person's job, trying to put together these programs and all these, and kind of learning on the job, baptism by fire. But after 6 weeks, it became 7 weeks, and after 7 weeks, it became 8 weeks. And then one day, my boss came in and said, this person had decided to step down because they had a larger commitment to family and weren't able to come back. And so I'd already been doing this for a couple of months at that time, so it was obvious to kind of make the transition into that space. Whereas 2 months before, I'd had no expectations of that. And so I spent several years in my mid-20s kind of building up this repertoire of doing programs and trying to bring people together and learning the ropes of that business. In 2009, early 2009, I'd kind of grown frustrated with some of that and wanted to do my own thing. Because when you're in a kind of a corporate structure, of course, you're doing what everyone else wants you to do and not necessarily following your own North Star. So I left that and I decided to start something. So the first thing I did that was smart was I reached out to my friend Mary Beth Babcock of Dwelling Spaces at that time. And I said, hey, do you want to do something with me? And that was about as broad as the explanation was. And she, of course, said yes, because she's a do-something kind of person. And we like those do-something kind of people. And I said, I want to try to do something in the book space, but I was kind of bored with what it was. If you've ever gone to a bookstore and you walk in and there's a book signing, but it's like somebody sitting at a table in the front, and they have like a stack of books, and you're trying not to make eye contact with them as they go in, and they're trying to make eye contact with you. And I call those sit-in signs. It's kind of an awkward situation. There's nothing necessarily fun about that. But I'd go to concerts and things like that, and I would think, well, why can't we bring the energy of entertainment to this space? Because when I think of people I love, speakers, writers, authors, I think of them the same way I think of Led Zeppelin or Jack White of the White Stripes or Andrea Bocelli. These are superstars to me in a certain kind of way. And I wanted to bring some energy to that. I was also interested in the concept of book clubs because, raise your hand if you've ever been in a book club before. Okay, so the nature of book clubs is one word, which is entropy, okay? It is very exciting when you start. It is very difficult to maintain them. I'll meet someone from time to time who says, I've been in a book club for like 45 years, and I shake their hand and I thank them for their good work, because that's a very difficult thing to do. I also knew that at that time, I'm 27, 28 years old. Everyone I knew who was in a book club was like my mom or my grandmother, and I didn't know anybody in my age range who was gathering to talk about books. So I thought, well, what if we did it in a bar? And we combined two great things, beer and books. Because our working motto at that time was, not everyone likes books and beer, but most people like at least one. And that's an entry point for some folks. And so we reached out to our friends at McNelly's, and I said, can I have the top floor of your bar to host a book club in? And they said yes. Once again, they didn't have to say yes. We had no money to offer them. They just thought it would be fun. And so in April of 2009, Mary Beth and I put together what we called Book Smart Tulsa, which was kind of our first incarnation of this. And it was going to be a citywide book club. We called it, this is really creative, Book Pub. You get it? Book Club At a pub, pretty cool. So we did this, and we were expecting, when we were early adopting of social media at that time, we didn't have any money to advertise or anything, so we were just using word of mouth. We were hoping we'd get 50 people. We had 400 plus people show up to that first thing. Now, that made a book club impossible because you can't have any kind of proper discussion with 400 plus people, but it became basically a big party of book nerds hanging out, drinking beer, and talking about, what are you reading? I'm reading this. What do you like? What do you like? All this stuff. And it was, you could see in people's eyes this recognition of like, it's not just me. There are others like us. And they saw this community, this idea was forming in their mind. And it was kind of a shock to us that we were able to kind of tap into something. But over a few months, that started to wane because we were really speaking to like one group. And it went from maybe 450 people to 300 people, but there was some trend afoot, and it was a downward trend. So I thought in the summer of that year, what if we threw out that model and started bringing in guests all the time? Because if we brought in new people all the time, it's going to be a different topic, different book, different emphasis. And that would bring in different audiences based on what they are. And then if you could peel off a few regulars for each thing, you're going to start building a base of constituents. And that's kind of what we wanted. We wanted to build a base of constituency for what we were doing. Because I always thought of this city and the culture in this city as kind of a wheel. So imagine this 360-degree wheel, if you can. And every spoke on that wheel represents kind of a cultural offering in the city. The opera, the ballet, museums, all the things we think about when you think about quote-unquote culture in your city. My argument was always that kind of quote-unquote book and literary arts just was a spoke on that wheel that was as deserving as everything else. But you really need all those components to have something that feels robust and 360. Because when I would travel to other cities, I would see these kind of communities and these places, and we didn't have that. And we were talking earlier, it's like, if you see a gap in this place you live, don't move away to find it. Try to figure out a way to make it where you are, You can fill that gap, If you say, how come this doesn't exist? Either try to make the thing exist or stop complaining that it doesn't exist. And that's what we tried to do, which was create something in the place where we were. So in July of that year, we started bringing in people. Now, here's the thing. We had literally no resources or money. So I had to beg publishers and all these things. So I went around to local restaurants and I got them to give us vouchers for food so we could feed these authors. I went to hotels and asked if they would give us rooms to put the authors up in. I offered nothing in return other than a smile and a thank you. I don't know why they did it, but they did. And, miles, we got miles donated so we could go to these publishers because even though I had been doing book work for a long time at that point, we had no track record based on this new thing. So whatever you'd done before when you're associated with some large thing had no impact when I would go back to these folks and say, hey, I'm on my own now, we're doing this thing, you want to send XYZ to Tulsa? And they'd be like, no. Okay, well, what do we do? Well, then I go back and I say, okay, here's the deal. I'll cover their flight, I'll cover their hotel, I'll feed them when they get here, we'll do all that. All you have to do is literally say yes. And even then, it was a little bit like pulling teeth, but we eventually found some chinks in the armor, and some of these larger publishers started sending us some folks when we would provide those services. And what we were hoping was, could we provide a great experience where that person would then go back and they would say, I loved my time in Tulsa, I had a great experience, and then you start building a reputation. Because at that time, when you think about the publishing industry, large-scale author events were happening on the coast for the most part, and the middle part of the country was mostly quote-unquote flyover country, and we were not getting those things. We were not on the grids or the maps that they kind of used to determine these things, which is not uncommon. But we were going to try one piece at a time to do that. And so what became kind of one author thing a month, and the other thing is we had nowhere to go. We didn't have a store, we didn't have a home base. I had to go to places and say, hey, do you want to do an event? And I can't pay you to rent the space or do anything, but you want to host this cool thing? And slowly we started building up a group of partners, so whether it would be galleries or museums or churches, All Souls, B'nai Muna, all these different places around town, we would host events. And they liked it too because it was bringing in a different dynamic, a different audience, and exposing people. Because oftentimes in those early times, let's say we were doing an event at a synagogue, I would say, how many people in this room have ever been to a synagogue before? And no one would raise their hand. And so almost de facto of doing all this work, you're exposing people to different parts of the city that they've never seen before, and you're kind of growing this sense of community within the city that they live in. And so through those early times, we were doing, one thing a month, and maybe it grew to 2 authors a month. And then we started slowly getting, like one day I got a phone call, and it was a publisher, and they said, we want to send X, Y, and Z to you. And I was like, wait, I don't have to ask for this? What do I have to do? I have like a couple backflips or something? No, okay. And so we would just piece by piece. So by about a year in, we're doing 3-4 things a month. And I started to realize there was one, what I call philosophy of what we do. And I now call it the theory of double exposure. And what is that? The theory of double exposure is this. 50% of the work that we have done and do is about exposing people who live here to interesting ideas, interesting authors, interesting speakers, interesting topics, things that they may want to discuss that have some relevance to the life that they live. But the flip side is exposing all the people that we bring in to what this place is, because oftentimes they will come in here with either little or no expectation of what our city is, what our community is. And I oftentimes think that's great. Bring me your low expectations. Bring me your blank slate, because they will leave feeling great about this place. They will go back and they will evangelize to their friends, their coworkers, their bosses, everyone else about the amazing experience that they had here. Because we'd have a band open, we'd get a local band to come open for an author. They'd be like, well, I've never had a band open for me. What am I, Dave Matthews? No, they didn't know what was going on. So we would try these different things. We'd have a bar at the book signing, which seemed just crazy at the time. One time we did an event about a book about Siberia, and I thought it would be great to give out free vodka to everybody. That's a learning moment where you have to try things and then you learn. That was not the smartest idea. But you live and you learn. So we had been doing that for a while, and at that time, we weren't selling books. We didn't have a bookstore, so we would have other bookstores. Steve's, for example, was still around at that time. Other books, Borders was still around a little bit at the beginning. And we would have other people come sell books for us, because I didn't even want to really be in that business. I wanted to do these large-scale things. I didn't want to handle all the logistics of that. But then Steve's went out of business in 2014, and there was kind of a collective moment where a lot of local authors were attempting to maybe buy that space and try to revive it, bring it back, but it just didn't happen. And then at that point, we're bringing in 50, 75, maybe 100 people a year. And the first question oftentimes I would get when I would have an author come off the plane, they'd say, well, what's your independent bookstore? And Steve's was the last bookstore in Tulsa that sold new books, that was independent, that was not a corporate bookstore. And I didn't want to be like, well, sorry, we don't have one. That didn't seem cool. So I thought, well, what can we do? What can we do? And that's how the idea was formed, to maybe say, what if we had our own bookstore that was a offshoot of what we're doing? And I became inspired by 2 things. Circle Cinema, which I love and have been a member of and been part of for many years, is a nonprofit independent cinema here. When you go there, if you go see a fun movie, you don't necessarily think about it being that. It's just a cool place to go. But they kind of built this community-based idea where they do programming. They do a lot of free programming for students, different groups, and they kind of changed the way I thought of what a movie theater could be. The second one was a museum gift shop. If you've been to any museum in the world, they all have a gift shop. Well, that's basically just a store that sells retail items, whether it's books about Picasso, weird pencils, an ear that looks like Van Gogh, it's an eraser made of, let's look at a Van Gogh ear eraser. It's an ear eraser. I know, clever. But those are nonprofit offshoots. The museum owns those shops. Everything they sell in the shop supports the work of that museum. Well, why couldn't a bookstore be the same thing? And that's how the idea came about to have a 501c3 bookstore, which was a crazy idea in 2015, because every lawyer we talked to had about 800 questions about it. And we wanted to do it right, so we kind of went through all the proper channels. And at that time, there were 3 or 4 maybe models we could compare to around the country, but really nothing in this part of the country. And so we formed an umbrella company called the Tulsa Literary Coalition. It's 501c3. We put a board together. And the first person I reached out to was a woman named Cindy Halsey. And Cindy was at the Tulsa City County Library. She was kind of in the leadership role there. She did all the adult programming. I'd known her for years and years. She had this great, well-paying city job with amazing benefits. And I said, hey, do you want to leave all that behind and come do this crazy thing with me? And she was in her mid-50s at the time, not too far from retirement. I was like, let's go. And she took a leap of faith and said, yeah, we'd always kind of been friends, and she talked about the dream of doing something on her own. She left all those kind of cushy benefits and came and did this wild thing with me. We put together the board 2015. We found our space downtown. We decided to call it Magic City Books. Why is it called Magic City Books? So Magic City is what Tulsa was referred to in the early teens and 20s oftentimes. And why? Because people could come here, get rich overnight in the oil and gas business. You will see things, if you look at that time, a lot of things referring to this as the Magic Empire or the Magic City. There's a speech, and it kind of died out after, say, the Great Depression, but Harry Truman, while he was sitting president, gave a commencement speech at the University of Tulsa in 1949, I believe. Maybe it might have been 50. So imagine that. Sitting president comes to do the commencement speech at the University of Tulsa. I found his speech in the transcript, and the first line of it, he says, "Great to be here in the Magic City." So obviously that was like an applause line, and people would have known what that meant. So it was obviously a very known colloquialism at that time. Also, when I was about 17 years old, I read a book called Magic City by an author named Jewel Parker Rhodes, and it was a novel about the Tulsa Race Riot, is what it was called at the time, now the Tulsa Race Massacre. I had so little knowledge about that event, and this would have been about 1997, that I thought it was made up in this novel. Didn't think it was a real thing. And I had gone down to Greenwood all the time in the late 80s, early 90s for the Greenwood Jazz Festival, and I would see amazing people like Natalie Cole and different jazz icons there. And I remember going to those things, and it was on Greenwood, big stage, everything. Not one mention of that, which is kind of nuts. And so I read this book, and it had always stuck with me because it was kind of something that made me, and did Google even exist in 1997? There was really no way to look things up easily at that time. And it was the first time that I'd kind of thought about that. So when we found our space down on Archer, which is in historic Greenwood, I wanted to kind of honor that book, which was important to me, but also speak to the kind of aspirational idea that early framing of the word Magic City meant at that time. And thirdly, it looks really cool on a t-shirt. You've probably seen some around town. And that's, that'd have to be the number one reason, but it was definitely on the top 5. So we started this idea of Magic City Books. And by that time, we'd had built up a pretty big reputation in about 5 years. We weren't having to beg anymore. We were getting amazing people coming through. And we thought, well, let's kick off our event, our bookstore, with something quite special. We were supposed to open in the fall of 2016 at this location on the corner of Archer and Detroit, right there on that beautiful corner space. Well, you've heard of this jazz club that's underneath us called the Lowdown. It used to be called Duet. Well, there was no basement under us. They had to dig that space out. Well, in the process of digging out that space, I get a call one day and they say, "Hey, Jeff, slight problem today. The entire floor of the bookstore collapsed while we were digging out this jazz club." And I like jazz. Nothing against jazz. But it basically pushed us back 1 calendar year. So we had already scheduled a kind of kickoff event because in June of 2016, we were going to start selling under the guise of Magic City Books. So now that all our events, we'd be selling our own books and making our own money and all these different things. So I had booked an author named Stephen King, you've heard of him before, to come do an event. And this was supposed to be the launch event for us, but we ended up having to do it at Kane's Ballroom, which was great. It sold out in, I think, 35 seconds. It sold out. And what ended up being like a 2-month out, we're about to open a celebration, it became like a 13-month out celebration. But what was really cool about it was in that 13 months between kind of the launch event with Stephen King, where we announced Magic City Books, to opening in the week of Thanksgiving 2017, by the time we opened, Everybody knew what Magic City Books was because we had like a full year of 100 events to do things and really build the brand. So it was another example of kind of panic at the offset, but then figuring out how to kind of ride it, and it actually was a benefit to us down the road. And so 2017 fall, we open up. Hundreds of people lined out on the street on a cold Monday, November afternoon. Things are going great. 6 months after we open, I get a call that my partner, Cindy, who was our ED at the bookstore by that time, had found a glioblastoma in her brain and had terminal brain cancer. She was 59 years old, and they gave her 8 weeks to live. And so we had this plan. I remember thinking, she said, I'm going to do this for 10 years, then I'm going to retire, and then I'm going to take over and be ED. And we had this, it's kind of like that, what's that famous John Lennon quote, life's what happens while you're busy making other plans. And we were just blindsided by this. And so in June of that year, she basically had to step down from the bookstore. And then by September, she died. And so this was the kind of the in-house leader of our whole project. This was the person who was our, more than just my kind of right-hand person, kind of my true partner in this. And so what do you do when you're kind of left adrift after this dream happens? You have this thing come to fruition, and then all of a sudden, bam, you get nailed with this dose of reality, this big dose of reality. Well, we kind of just kept rolling, kept doing our thing. Well, in February of 2020, we had decided it was time to hire a new executive director. Great timing. And so I'd kind of been doing interim stuff for Cindy's position all that time, and I thought, man, it's going to be so great to kind of take this off my plate. Well, I think the first week we scheduled interviews after having the position out there for a while was March 10th, 2020. And then you kind of know what happened after that. And so we ended up putting that on hold. And then we entered into this weird period of, we have this amazing thing, people loved it, and how do we kind of survive? We'd been thriving for a little window period of time, and now we're hit with this crazy thing. And our whole deal was like large in-person events, which was not the thing you wanted to be known for in April, March 2020. How do we do that? Oh, then we pivot, okay? We did over 200 virtual events. We did all these things, and you try to figure out, well, how do you make money? How do you bring in any revenue when you're doing this, when you're an in-person kind of space? We pivoted to doing all these different things. The one thing that we came up with that was the saving grace of that whole year was this idea of what we called, you guys remember that time period where they were telling you to like wash your vegetables and stuff, and you couldn't leave, and it was a weird moment. And people were getting so stir crazy and you couldn't do anything. We thought, what if we let people come in the bookstore for 1 hour at a time, all by themselves? Totally safe, whatever. They can just kind of get in there and chill. We ask them for what their favorite music is, so we'll put their music on when they walk in, so they're listening to their playlist, and they can just shop by themselves and feel somewhat normal for an hour. We called it solo shopping hours, and we put it on Sign Up Genius online, and people could book their hour. It didn't cost anything extra. You just had to book your slot. We would have a person there. They'd come unlock the door, and then our person would go back and just be in the office, and you could have the whole store to yourself, walk around, listen to your music, shop, and then you'd leave your big stack of books up on the thing. Our person would come ring them up. You'd go back, get the bag, head out. We booked 3 weeks full in the first 2 days. Okay? People were leaving with like armfuls of books. I mean, I kind of felt guilty for a moment because like on an average Tuesday, we were making more money than we usually did because people were buying for their whole family. They were kind of trying to get, I think there was also like a guilt element which we benefited from, which was we're giving you our whole store for an hour. You better leave with more than one book. So, that was a nice thing. And so, and that's kind of the cool thing about being small and nimble, If you're kind of a large setup with all these different pieces, we just went to our board and we said, can we try this? And when you're small enough, if you do something cool, it ripples across the whole industry and other people start ripping it off, which is fine. That's the kind of thing you want people to steal. But if it made no difference, no one would care. So that's kind of the cool thing about innovation and experimentation in these smaller spaces. And we thought just that might help, but it really transformed what we were doing and created a bridge for us in that time period. And all this stuff kind of goes back to, like I said, the audacity to try things, the audacity to ask, and also understanding that the community here is willing to kind of go with us, support us, try things with us. Tulsa, when I used to have people come and we'd have someone there, and I could guarantee you when we'd say, okay, it's time for questions. This would be especially the first 3 or 4 years. We'd have some notable person there. I could almost time it by my watch when someone would stand up and go, oh, hi, just curious, real quick question. Why did you come to Tulsa? And that would be a question they would always ask. And I would always think like, well, why not, you know? And it really spoke to me, and I think this really has changed over the last 15 to 20 years. I've seen it change. We had such low civic self-esteem that we didn't even think we deserved cool people to come here, you know? And I'd always think, well, why not, you know? We have kind of gotten to the place where that question is no longer asked. And I view that as a sign of progress for our city. We've also gotten to a place where when we first started doing programs, you'd be lucky to find 3 or 4 cool cultural things to go to a week, and now you have to choose between 3 or 4 things on a night. And sometimes people will come up to me and they'll say, I'm so sorry, I can't come to all the events. And I go, I can't come to all of our events. We do too many. There's too many other cool things going on. That's a sign of health when you have too many things to choose from, cool things to choose from. You know, I wanted to go see Billy Strings last night at BOK Center. I also wanted to go see Wilco at Kane's Ballroom. There's too many damn things to do, you know? That's a good thing. That's a sign of a healthy community, not when it's like, well, one cool author comes to the library every December. That's great, but we need a little bit more than that. We wanted to shove as much collective culture down the throat of the city as we possibly could and make you have to kind of choose between all those different things. My role in some ways, I kind of keep joking that I'm semi-retired right now because we finally did get an amazing ED in place. We have a team that is just unrivaled. You know, most of our team have master's degrees and other things, and they choose to be, you know, part-time booksellers because they just love that culture so much. They're super smart. They know how to talk to you about things. They know how to kind of figure out what you like. We have this amazing team. And I used to be where I would interview at the peak of what we were doing, I was gone 4 to 5 nights a week interviewing people for author events. And my wife, who's a small business owner, she owns Antoinette Baking Company downtown here. I remember after the pandemic and I had to stop doing that, I thought, why the hell was I doing that? You know? And she thought, yeah, why were we doing that? Because at that point, I had gotten to the point where I didn't need to be doing that. We could have had people helping out. And it became about control, and you want to make sure everything's so tight and perfect. And now I kind of do like 1 out of every 10, 15 things. And we have an amazing lineup of people who come in and guest moderate. We bring in, pair up cool people together and do all these different things. And so I kind of have had a real chance to kind of look back at it and take a breath and see the work that that team, and you know, we're trying to pay homage to Cindy and all the great work that she did, and see, you know, 15 years into this project, in some ways, it has been harder than I ever thought it would be, more gratifying than I ever thought it could be. It's felt like 2 years some days, 25 years other days. It has all those different pushes and pulls that any kind of endeavor that you're passionate about has from time to time. But it's also been the thing that has fueled me, you know. I was 28 years old when I started. I'll be 45 next summer. You know, that's an interesting period of your life to kind of have this kind of thing happen. And I'm such a lucky person, you know, to see this dream come manifest. I've never done anything to deserve that kind of thing. But, you know, last year we had a great chance to host Tom Hanks. And we were like one of 4 places in the country that he went. And at one time, when we put the ticket, did anybody go to that? Yeah, nobody could get tickets, that's the problem. We did it at the PAC, there's like 3,000 seat venue there. When we put the tickets on sale, I could see on the PAC's ticketing system how many people were in line to try to buy tickets. And there were 28,000 people trying to buy tickets at that time. And then when I was on stage talking to him, which was the most surreal thing in the world, you're talking to like Woody from Toy Story here, and Forrest Gump, and Saving Private Ryan, and all these things, bosom buddies, there you go. It's surreal. The wildest thing about that was looking out at that audience and kind of thinking about the road that led there. It wasn't necessarily about him or that thing, but that would you have imagined being in this space, when we were begging restaurants to give us food vouchers for our authors and seeing if the Holiday Inn Express would give us a couple of rooms, And you can never kind of tell. And the one thing, if I have any kind of advice to impart, is just have the audacity to ask. There were many times when if I had kind of just thought like, why would they do that? If I'd kind of thought that in my mind, I would have never had the kind of maybe naivete, the great naivete to try something that seemed impossible. There's a lot of room to grow. I'm sure many of you have never been to Magic City Books. I won't make you raise your hand if you haven't. You know who you are. But I also get excited about thinking about what's next, Sometimes you could think, well, hey, we've kind of reached our apex. In some ways, I get so excited about thinking about what we haven't done and what we can do. So I want to take some time for some questions, but thank you for listening today. I know we have a microphone. We have about 5 minutes or so, right, for some questions. Yeah, if anybody has any.
All right, Jeff, reading anything good lately? And second question, you've always been very innovative, creating the 1 hour time slot, but also you did an adult book fair, which was also very popular. If you could talk really briefly about that. And also, are there any other really cool things you're excited about that you'd like to announce?
Derek, how long have you and I known each other, you think?
We go back to Bixby High School.
So probably pushing 30 years, maybe, 25 plus years. So we did a thing, okay, so here's a quick thing. We've kind of gotten to this reputation where we do all these amazing author events. Well, I don't want to just be known for that, and also you don't want to be beholden to say, okay, Tom Hanks came, that's great. Well, guess what? That was May of last year. May of this year, we're looking at our P&L and going like, how come our sales are down 500%? Well, it's because we didn't make $150,000 off one event, Okay, well, what do? Well, I wanted to create what I call signature events, which would be things we fully control that are solely local, that are not tied to anybody else. And I was also intrigued with the idea of scholastic book fairs for adults with drinks. And so we thought it would be cool to do what I call an adult book fair, not adult book fair for adults, okay? Got that question 500 times. The adult book fair. And the idea was like bringing that spirit of fun and vibe together where we'd have a DJ playing, we would do all these things, we'd have glitter pens and stickers and all these different things. Basically, the concept is very simple. It was like going to a brewery, and we went to our friends at Neff Brewing Company here in town. We kind of did it right in front on the street right there. We basically moved the bookstore to a brewery. So we have tables with different sections, science fiction, kids, whatever the thing. It's literally just a bookstore, except there's music playing and people are drinking and having fun, all this stuff. So we did that. We've done 3 so far. The first one we did was in February of 2023. It was 30 degrees outside. We had 5,000 people show up. It was overwhelmingly insane. It was really cool for our rep. People thought it was super cool. It will live in infamy in some ways, okay? There were people wrapped around the block forever that couldn't even get there. People were like hitting each other out of the way, trying to get certain books. It was chaos. Beautiful chaos, but chaos. And so we did that, and man, it was like we tapped into something. And it kind of was the thing I mentioned at the bar the first time. It was that on steroids. This was like the Barry Bonds version of a book club. So we decided to do a redo. And so in fall of 2023, we put in a system. We said, okay, what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing, but as kind of a mulligan to see if it works better for people's experience, because ultimately that was not a good experience for the shopping and just people hanging out. It was chaotic and it had its own kind of energy the way Woodstock did, but ask about the bathrooms at Woodstock. Okay, so we put in a thing where basically people would reserve a time. Okay, so it was like a 6-hour window. You're like an hour 1, you're an hour 2, and it would just create a little bit more flow to it. Well, we ended up, that time we had like 3,500 people come, but we made more money because people actually could have time to look around. They didn't feel the pressure of these things. We do a thing called Blind Date with a Book, which is where we take advanced copies of books we get, we wrap them in wrapping paper, and we sell them for $5, and you don't know what you're getting. People love this for some reason. There was a time in that first one where I just had a basket of those, and I'm just like throwing them to people. It was like, I don't know what, it was just craziness. So we did that. And then this year we did our third one with this kind of rebooted system in September. We just did it. And we had about 4,000 people show up. And in that 4-hour window, we made $50,000. Okay? Now, let me tell you, I know a lot of people think we are a nonprofit bookstore. A lot of other bookstores come to me and they say, well, all bookstores are nonprofits. Technically. And so, well, what is it about this thing? Why did this many people? And I would ask people in line, I would say, why are you here? And this was not people who were like hardcore Magic City Books people. They came because it was a social event. They came because it was something that their friends told them they should go do, the way that you would go to the fair or something. It just had that vibe. And what I love about that is it did not have any airs up to it. It was not like, I hate the term literary oftentimes. This was just a fun thing to go do. If you like to read, whatever, we have to take a lot of the stuffiness out of this whole thing. You think about, guys with smoking jackets on and leather-bound libraries doing these things. This is not. This is fun. This is roller rink. This is like, have a good time. And so, yeah, that's been really transformative for what we do. Thank you, Derek. Couple more? Yeah.
Real quick, I'm thinking of your future customers.
Yeah.
We had a great speaker a couple of months ago from Reading Partners.
Yeah, we love them.
Can you explain what you do with them?
Yeah, so here's a great example. Reading Partners is a wonderful organization. If you would like to get involved, you should help kids. You kind of mentor them and spend time with. Anybody done Reading Partners in here before? It's a wonderful organization. A great example is at the book fair we did, there's a group called Gaining Ground, and it's basically a book bus that goes around to lower income neighborhoods and distributes free books to kids. And it's run by 2 librarians who are based out of Union elementary schools. And so we actually had them come to the book fair. They parked their big bus out there, and we just set up kids' books. And we said, hey, while you're buying your 50 books for yourself, why don't you buy one for the, this is the guilt thing again that we like to do. Why don't you buy one for these kids while you're at it? And I think hundreds of books were given to this book bus to do that. So we do all those things. We try to think of every event as a way to partner, whether it's something very serious. If we have an author coming in about opioid crisis, we'll have people there doing information from all the groups that are working on that. I mean, it can be very serious to very kind of more community-based, but thank you for that question. Hi.
So if you were able to duplicate yourself and you had a passion that was something other than books, have you seen anywhere else, or have you ever had a wacky idea for something where you could replicate the magic of transforming books in a different, you talked about the wheel of all the different areas, either in our community or something. It's pretty exceptional to see how broad and expansive and creative you've been with books, and that's your passion. If you could, what would that other dream be?
It's a great question, thank you, and I'll say it's very easy to say because I live a bifurcated life. All this work I do with Magic City Books is completely volunteer. I've never been paid a dime to do it. My real day job is I'm the director of communications for Philbrook Museum of Art. I've been there for 15 years. And I bring the same level of passion and creativity to that. And I think if you know that institution and you've seen it over the last 15 years, it's changed. And it's more accessible, and it's more fun, and it's more interesting than it's ever been. Scott, our previous director, spoke to you guys before he left a few months ago. And he was someone who really understood that vibe to how to change that institution, and we worked together very much on that. So I view them very much as parallel tracks, how you can kind of change an institution from the inside out. In some ways, entirely about tone. you know? Changing it upwards from the ground up with tone alone. So anyway, we're about out of time. Thank you all very much. Thank you for having me. See you soon.
Thank you, Jeff. What a jewel we have here in Tulsa. And as a quick plug for that last piece, I am a fan of the podcast, Museum Confidential. Look it up. It's really worth your time. You started off your speech talking about your superpower, so appropriately, our book this week that we'll donate to Silly Clinton Elementary is Christmas in the Batcave. Upcoming programs, next week will be our special holiday program featuring the Tulsa Opera. We'll have 2 weeks off for Christmas and New Year's. January 8th, Dr. Johnny Stevens, president of OSU Center for Health Sciences and interim president of OSU Tulsa, will be here. And January 15th will be Business Visitation Day. Please pay attention to your Monday messages for more information as that develops. Special thanks to gold sponsors this week: Weeby Trees, Tim Knoll; Max Electric Supply, Jack McGlumphy; Coldwell Banker Select, Sheree Gardner; OK Ethics, Mary Lytle. Silver sponsors: Associated Mortgage Corporation, Chuck Wilson; Bank First, Paul Baumann and Bill Miller; Clear Ridge LLC, Matthew Bristow; Southern Millworks Incorporated, Bill Vogel; and bronze sponsors: Hanson and Holmes, Richard Holmes; Hearts for Hearing, Kaylee Clark; Interim Healthcare, Terry Heritage; John Croissant, Allstate Agency, John Croissant. Meetings after today's meeting: Long Range Planning, room 231, and Camp Enterprise in room 232. Today's theme reminded me of an article I read some time ago about why baseball is featured in so many literary works and poems, things like The Natural and Shoeless Joe and Casey at the Bat. There were a lot of explanations, but the one that really stuck out to me was how metaphorical the game can be to life. So I found that article and I pulled a passage that really stuck with me about things that, metaphors that we use in our daily lives. We talk about knocking it out of the park when we do well. We strike out when we fail. We touch base with old friends. We estimate in ballpark figures. We take rain checks to reschedule things like they did back in the day for baseball games. We separate things into big leagues and bush leagues. Sometimes we throw a curveball or are thrown a curveball in life, and some things just come out of left field. Other times we play hardball, and sometimes we have to apologize for talking too much, quote unquote, inside baseball. So these are the things that really draw me to the game of baseball, and I was inspired to look that up because of today's theme. So with that, our meeting is adjourned. Have a good day.